you have questions for Stan after his wonderful presentation, you can put those in the chat and he can get to those after the presentation. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our partner, Bob, with the City of Dallas, and he's going to do our introduction of our presenter.
You bet. Well, I didn't know who was presenting today until I discovered it was Stan. I thought, well, that's great. I've known Stan for a while, and we've worked together on several projects. I noticed in the notes that he sent, or you sent, I guess, Vanessa, that Stan started gardening in 1986 when he bought a house. And I thought, well, that's an interesting way to get into gardening, but obviously it appealed to him and he got into it. So what I was very amazed at, frankly, is his variety of gardens that he's personally been to. And not only in this country, but in other countries. We're going to focus on the ones kind of here, but he and I've been to maybe 6 of them, but he's been to other ones. So he'll get to share with us his experience of those and he's also kind of a history buff. So he's got, that input. He's been very involved in the library for as long as I've known him. So Stan, why don't you take it over and welcome to our joint session together.
Okay, well, thank you, Robert. So today, I'm going to talk about my top 10 favorite gardens in Texas in alphabetical order. There are other great public gardens in Texas that I haven't been to, so they're not on my list yet. And I'm going to provide a bit of information about each of these gardens and include some photos that I've taken over the years. Now, there were a couple I couldn't find photos for because it'd been a while since I'd been there. So I had to cheat and use some photos I took off the internet. Feel free to ask your questions after I talk about the gardens at the end and use the chat function. So we're going to start with the Chandler Gardens in Weatherford. And we'll go on to the Clark Gardens in Mineral Wells, the Dallas Arboretum, the Fort Worth Botanic Garden, the International Water Lily Garden in San Angelo, the Moody Gardens in Galveston, the San Antonio Botanic Gardens, the Texas Discovery Gardens, the Tyler Rose Gardens, and then finally the Zilker Botanic Garden in Austin. Now, most of these gardens were started by individuals who had a passion for gardening. And the Chandler Gardens is a wonderful example of that. Now, I read about this garden in the Dallas Morning News years ago. And the story was that Douglas Chandler had met Ina Kootman Hill of Weatherford at a dinner party in New York City. And from that chance meeting, they had a courtship, which led to marriage in 1934. And they moved back to Weatherford. And their garden, it covers 3.5 acres of land. And it was barren at the time. And they really put in a lot of effort into it. They used picks, they used shovels, and they used dynamite to create this garden. And what he did is he provided the concept of English garden rooms, and he used an awful lot of Chinese motifs scattered through the gardens. And they were fortunate that it was during the Depression and labor was cheap because they put a lot of effort into this garden. So they planted over 150 trees. They had all kinds of flowers, wisteria, water features. I mean, it's an incredible sight to see, and it's only squeezed into 3.5 acres. And it's at the end of a street in Weatherford, a historic district. So, unfortunately, times go along and people die. And so these gardens were neglected after Ina died in 1978. Then it was bought by a couple. They purchased it, took care of it, but it was a lot of effort. And eventually they sold it to the city of Weatherford in 2002. So let's show you. Well, that was the directions. It's open 7 days a week, but it's usually shorter hours on Saturdays and Sundays because they have a lot of weddings there. So it's a popular place to have your wedding. Now here's the plaque from when the city took it over. Now here's the example of a water feature. Now this is the courtyard behind the house, and you can see it's set up for a wedding because there's tables and chairs and all. What you'll also see is, now this is from Lewis Carroll's book, Alice in Wonderland. Again, you'll have Chinese statues scattered through the gardens. And now here's an interesting perspective. Looking down this walkway, if you look further, you see a water feature, and in the very back, you see an arch. Now this is that sense of a garden room, going from one room to the next.
Stan, I'm sorry to interrupt. Someone are having problems seeing your slides. Could you do it from presentation mode?
Okay. How do I do that?
If you just click, oh,
Sorry, go ahead, Vanessa.
Oh no, there should just be at the top. There's that little, it looks like a screen with a play button on it on the top menu.
Play button.
So like there's the auto save, and then there's a save, and then if you keep going over a little bit, there is the little play button there.
Is that it?
Yes, you may have to scroll forward a little bit to where you were at. I'm sorry about that.
Well, now I'm not sure how to do that.
You should just be able to hit enter, and it should advance. Is that not working? Oh.
Okay, there we go.
That's great.
Okay, so water features. As you can tell, there's water features scattered through here. And look at the stonework. See, they've spent a lot of time creating stone features throughout the gardens, using concrete and rocks and all, transforming what was a hill into a garden. Now, what I noticed this year, this is from the spring. A couple weeks ago, I went back to get new pictures. And I noticed how they were using elephant ears, and then they were planting planters below in big raised beds or big containers, and using the color contrast between the elephant ears and the plants below. Here they had some glass figures scattered in the garden, sort of inspired by Chihuly, who did a big exhibit in the Dallas Arboretum some years back. And you can tell it's just starting. This section, this bed is just starting because they've just planted all these plants down below. So this must be an annual bed in this garden. Now this was a sedum that caught my eye because of the bloom. I'd never seen a bloom like that on a sedum. And this is one of several containers that were scattered along the archway that they had around the courtyard at the garden. Then they have a gazebo that you can look out over the neighborhood, and actually a nice point that you could gather a group in. And this looks back into the neighborhood behind them. Chinese archway is called a moon arch. You'll see this in many Oriental gardens and Chinese gardens. Now this is one of the water features. The lions are spitting out water, and this is quite a large water feature. But notice the intricacy of this. This is something you just don't normally find in a garden of any kind, let alone a public garden. And now here's a photo from a couple of years back. This is towards the end of spring when all the daffodils are in bloom. And you look at this hillside just covered in color. Now this is a photo of Eileen Westbrook, well, actually a painting of Eileen Westbrook. She was 17 at the time, and her family were friends of the Chanders. And this was her coming out photo or painting. And of course, when I saw that painting, I said, definitely 1930s. It reminded me of the old movies that you would see, the MGM movies, where the woman was always in a sort of a slinky outfit coming down the stairway before a party. Now, for this particular garden, no food service on site unless you've got a special occasion. And again, always wear sensible shoes when you're going to a garden like this because you're going to be walking a lot. You want to come back several times during the year because what you see in the spring is not what you're going to see in the summer or the fall because a garden changes over time. And allow about an hour to tour this garden. And you might say, well, why would I want to go to a public garden? What am I going to get out of a public garden? Well, think of it as a living classroom. It gives you an idea of plants that will do well in your climate, plants that you may not know exist, or plants that give you an idea of how it will fit in your garden over time. And it also gives you a perspective of if you plant one plant, what it would look like, if you plant maybe a dozen or 2 dozen, how it makes a difference in your garden. So it's a classroom, and each of these gardens is different. Each of them has a different specialty. So that's the Chandra Gardens. It's in Weatherford. It's about an hour and a half's drive from Dallas and Fort Worth. And afterwards, you can always eat lunch in downtown Weatherford. There's wonderful places to eat. And again, you can do this in a day's trip. The next one is a little further out. It's about another half hour out in Mineral Wells. It's right on the border between Weatherford and Mineral Wells. And it's called the Clark Gardens. And this is a love story between Max and Billy Clark. And they built a garden on 143 acres. And really, when you drive out there, when we first went out there, the first time I and a friend went out there, we nearly missed it because the sign was so small. But luckily now they have a big sign, you can see it. And this is a completely different type of garden because they're using native plants and Texas adaptable plants. And it's got a wide variety of gardens there. Now here they are, Max and Billy Clark. Now, this one, their hours vary a great deal. So if you're going out there, you always need to call in advance to be sure that they're open. Here's a map of the garden. And if you look at it down at the very bottom on the left where it says A, that's where you come in on the parking lot. And then you wander through these 143 acres to see all the different gardens that they have there. But they've got water features. They've got a lot of brickwork. They've got a railroad garden. I mean, a little bit of everything and a couple of lakes. So it's quite an interesting place to see. And it's totally different from the Chandra Gardens. So this is the statue in the parking lot. It tells you it's going to be a quite interesting place to visit. And then here's coming into the gardens, and you look at the brickwork and the water feature, and I don't know, he must have had a deal with a brick maker because I've never seen a garden that's used so much brick for walkways and arches. I mean, it's just amazing. And really, it's not a very busy garden. I've never seen that many people in it, but it's a treasure out in the country, surrounded by lots and lots of trees. But again, you notice the detail, the elaborateness of the stonework and the bricks. Now here you have what's called, some people call this wandering Jew. It's a purple plant and it blooms with a pink flower on it. And it's a perennial that'll come back every year. It doesn't matter how cold it gets, it'll come back. It's also known as Purple Heart. Here's the Garden Railroad. There are actually several different lines on this railroad. And they run in and out of the control building, out into the country and to the gardens. And it's a great thing if you've got kids who love railroads or who are just looking for something different to see. And it's also for those adults who never got to have a railroad of their own. Here's one that you can see in a garden. And as I said, there's several different lines to this. Here's inside of the control room where they have this little tiny town built for the trains to run by. And this is the Weatherford Station. And that's the old courthouse. Now they have a historic tree collection, historic tree trail. And again, brick, as you notice, brick covered walkways with the wisteria. And the lined beds, all their garden beds are lined with bricks. Here's one of their lakes, and that wooded area looks like a patio. That's a nice area you can sit. And when they have food service available, they serve food from this area here. But they've got a lot of lilies out there. And this is summertime. This is like late May when the sun was out. So that one is the Clark Gardens. Our next one, we're going to Dallas to the Arboretum. And it's actually a fairly new garden. It only opened in 1984. And it was a combination of two estates, the DeGolyer estate and the Camp House. And when those houses were built, it was out in the country. These were built in the late 30s. You can tour the DeGolyer home, which is a beautiful house. And the two estates together cover about 66 acres. And they've been building on this for many years. And in 2018, they had over 1 million people visit. They have a lot of activities year-round. Their biggest events are the Dallas Blooms in the spring and the Fall Pumpkin Festival in October and November. Now, what you need to know when you're going to visit there, the cost varies a great deal. It depends on your age, the time of the year, and if you're a member. The cost to park is $10 unless you go online. And in August, it's only $5 to park. And it's open most days except for Christmas. Now, these are photos I've taken over the years. This is from 2020. This was February, just before everything started to lock down. And they have an incredible number of cherry trees. I've never planted one, but I'm always inspired. Every year I go to see, when I see those cherry trees in bloom, I say, you know, next year I should have a cherry tree in my yard. Giant hyacinths. This is a perennial, but at the Arboretum, they'll throw out all their bulbs after they bloom in the spring to put in annuals, something else. And now I've tried growing these in my own yard and they come back, but they don't really ever look that great because they really need a cold winter to look good. So like we had a really cold winter in February. Well, my hyacinths looked much better this year, but in a normal winter here, they don't do that well because it's not cold enough. One of the things the Arboretum is known for is their trial gardens. And these started when Jimmy Turner was the botanical director there. And what he does is he gets plant nurseries all across the country and across the world to send plants to Dallas to test them out. And his motto was, if we can't kill them, then you can sell them in North Texas. And what they try to do is figure out which are the best plants to survive in our climate, since our climate is kind of different. It has very extremes as far as temperature and moisture. So they're testing out daffodils and pansies. They also have a section where they test out container gardens, and you'll see them scattered throughout the gardens where they're testing these plants. A Tasteful Place is a fairly recent addition, a couple of years old now. And what they do is they have vegetables that they're growing in front of this building. And every day, well, before COVID, they would have 3 samples of particular food, of that food that they were growing, to give you an idea of what that food would taste like as a dip, as an appetizer, maybe as a soup. So they had a whole variety of things. And they also did a lot of cooking classes there. Hopefully, maybe this fall, they'll come back to having those classes again. But it's an interesting concept to give people an idea of what things you can grow other than what you get in the grocery store, stuff that could actually grow in your yard. Water features. The Dallas Arboretum has a ton of water features, and it always makes me want to get some rocks and put a water pump in my yard. But then I say, well, you know, my yard's not that big. I probably couldn't fit it in. But it inspires me to think about it. And it gives you an idea. Every time you go there, you'll see something different that you say, well, could I do it in my yard? Could I grow that here? One of the new features they added a few years back was the Nancy Rutchick Red Maple Reel. And it was 2 acres of Japanese maples. Now, Japanese maples are a lovely tree to have in your garden if you've got shade in the summertime, because most Japanese maples do not do well in our summer heat. They just get burned to a crisp if they have exposure to direct sunlight all during the day. So they need afternoon shade. Now, there's a few varieties that will actually grow in the sun, but they're pretty rare. And one of the things they did with these maples is they brought one of the maple trees all the way from Portland, Oregon. They brought it during the winter, and they nearly got stuck in the ice in West Texas when they were bringing it. So they went to a great deal of effort to create this garden. And it's lovely at any time of the year, but the fall is when the color is the peak. So like October, November, even into December, it's a very lovely garden to walk through. But as I said, it's one of my favorite trees to look at. And I have about, I guess, 8 of them now in my yard in a shady area. But the color is what you buy them for. So that was the Arboretum. They're open year round. Check them out anytime to go and visit. Now, one of the oldest botanic gardens in Texas is our Fort Worth Botanic Garden. Now, they're now charging to go to the gardens, but it's an interesting place to visit, and it's a more natural garden. The Dallas Arboretum is more a pretty garden, and it's just finely tuned to view. When you go to the Fort Worth Botanic Garden, it's more of a natural garden. It has lots of wild areas that you can tour. It has a variety of gardens to see. They're lovely at any time of year. And they have things like a conservatory for tropical plants. They have a begonia garden. They have a Japanese garden and a Four Seasons garden. They've got a native tree boardwalk. And one side are trees that are native to Texas, and the other side are invasive trees. They have some trial gardens, and they have a water-wise demonstration garden. Now, I went back here this spring to Fort Worth, and so I got to get some photos out of the conservatory as well as the gardens. So this one's been updated. But they have some lovely plants I'd love to have in my house because it's a tropical plant. It's not something I can grow outside all year round. I'd have to bring it in. And I don't have a big greenhouse. Now this is from the Begonia Bank, Species Bank. I don't know if they survived the winter because, you know, so many people lost power. A lot of greenhouses lost power and a lot of plants were killed. Here's a mass planting of zinnias. Now this is in the courtyard outside the main entrance to the gardens. This is where they're getting plants ready for summer. They've planted them. You can tell they're all planted because recently planted because they're too even. You can tell they're just starting out. But this time of year, daylilies are blooming. This is the Stella d'Oro, which is a gorgeous lily that spreads and comes back every year. Now here you're looking out on the gardens. You've got cannas in the background. You've got begonias in the front. Again, the color contrast. And it gives you an idea, the more of if mass planting is how you can make a difference in your garden. So more is better, and a nice color contrast to pull your eye out to the cannas. Now this is the view. This used to be the rose gardens, but due to rosette, they had to pull them all out and replace them with other blooming perennials. Now this structure, the water feature, the water wheel that goes down there, that was all built by the WPA during the 1930s. Now this was the Rock Springs back in the winter of 2018. They had just built this up within the last year or so. So about 2017, they were building this, and it was wintertime, so it didn't look like much. Then they've got a Japanese garden. Now, the Japanese gardens go back to 1973. It's a very quiet place to contemplate. They've got koi fish. They've got things that they've received from their sister cities in Japan. It's a beautiful space just to look at and wander through. Japanese pine trees. They do a Japanese festival in the spring and in the fall, where they bring in folks from the community who have Japanese ancestry. Here you have and they do drum performances. They have ikebana and bonsai demonstrations, drum demonstrations. They give you a little taste of Japanese culture. Here you've got a Japanese maple, a good-sized Japanese maple. Here you've got a bonsai tree. This was during one of the Japanese festivals. Here's the Japanese drummer troupe. These are locals who play the drums, and they come and perform every year during the Japanese festival. Here's from the Four Seasons garden. So they've got plants that bloom during all 4 seasons of the year. So this is spring, almost summer. It's a bit green right there. But when you get close, you see things like cannas that are already in bloom. And the interesting things about cannas is there's a place up in Oklahoma where they grow cannas as a crop, harvest them, and then ship them all around the country. And they have a canna festival in September. And I went there one year just to see it because I never could imagine what it would look like to go to a canna farm. And it looked like corn growing in the fields, except they were cannas. Here you've got some yarrow that's in bloom. You've got some purple heart behind it. And these beds are marked off by wood. You can see some raised beds in the background. Now here you've got some asters that are in bloom. And there's spring asters and there's fall asters. So that's Fort Worth. It's only 30 minutes away, 30 minutes to an hour. And every time you go, you'll see something different. The next garden we're going to see is in San Angelo, Texas. It's called the International Water Lily Garden. Again, a passionate person who had a collection of water lilies offered to create a lily pond at the Civic League Garden. So he found an old neglected pond and transformed it into a garden. And it has plants, lilies that you cannot find anywhere else in the world. And Ken Landon is the individual who was responsible for this. So it's located along the Concho River. It's part of the city park. And what you'll see are lilies from all over the world. So here's from the Civic League Park. And this was actually taken back on Memorial Day weekend. And it's a video, short little video, because my phone was deciding to take videos instead of photos. Now here's a view of the ponds. You can see there are a number of ponds, and these are quite deep. They're big concrete ponds. They're probably 3 to 4 feet deep and 30 or 40 feet in length. And it's early for them because lilies like heat, hot, dry heat. And the more sun, the better, because they're tropical plants. So they'll get bigger and the blooms will get better, but they'll bloom a day, every day they'll have new blooms. And some of these lilies are actually as much as 6 feet across. Now here's a plaque about the park. The park was established in 1903. There we go. Again, here's another view of the ponds. And it's actually become an international attraction. They have people come from all over the globe to see these water lilies. And then here we are looking into the pond. You can see a number of flowers in bloom, different colors and sizes. And this is a yellow lily from the Nymphaceae family. Then we've got pink lilies in the front, and then we've got distant lilies that are called Normageddii. And what you find with a lot of these plants is someone has hybridized them and named them. So here we got Pink Nova. And here are the terrace gardens. You can see these are old concrete and stone, and they're terraced up above the gardens. And you can tell it's actually quite dry and dusty out there. They've had about 6 inches of rain so far this year. But it has no effect on the lilies. They don't care. As long as it's sunny, they're happy. And then here's looking back down towards the Concho River. So this garden has no charge. The best time to go is in the summertime. September, it's still in good shape. Sometime in October, it'll get a bit cooler and they'll have to start taking the lilies inside. There's no place to eat on site, but there's a restaurant across the street, and then downtown San Angelo is just a few blocks away. Again, it's right along the Concho River. So next one is Moody Gardens. Now the Moody Gardens are in Galveston, and this actually started as a therapy program, and then it evolved into a garden. And then they added some pyramids to house some of the gardens. They added some IMAX theaters. They added a hotel. And it became quite different from the original vision of a therapy place. There are 3 glass pyramids. There's several IMAX theaters. There's a paddle boat. There's an aquarium, a tropical rainforest. And it takes several days to see everything. And of course, they have prices that vary by age, how long you want to stay, what you want to see. It can get quite complicated. So you always check out their website before going to get your best options of what you want to see. So here are the 3 pyramids looking out over the bay. There's the Rainforest Pyramid. So they actually have a rainforest inside that glass pyramid. But you can see, parakeets or parrots. You can see penguins. And when we went to see the butterflies inside. A shark, They have a Discovery Museum. The hours are actually quite short. I was surprised. It's 10 to 4. So you really need to plan ahead to make sure you see everything you want to see in the time you have. There are some food options on site. There's several movie theaters. And the Rainforest Pyramid has an extensive butterfly collection. But again, it's a little bit of everything. Now, if I were going, I would go when it's not peak tourist season. I would go in the off season. So after school goes back to session in the fall or in the spring when people are in school. Now, the next we're going to look at is the San Antonio Botanic Garden. Now, San Antonio has a totally different type of garden. They have over 50 acres, and their focus is botanic diversity, environmental stewardship, and helping people connect to nature. Oh, excuse me, it's only 38 acres, but anyway, it's a wonderful garden. Hours, of course, vary by season. And of course, with COVID restrictions, you always need to check out beforehand what their restrictions are. Now, they have a culinary garden, just like the Dallas Arboretum, except it's a bit smaller. It was funded by the Zachary Foundation. But again, the idea is to grow things, to use what you've got that you can grow in your neighborhood, in your environment, instead of importing everything. They do have a Japanese garden as well. They have a conservatory, and this is 90,000 square feet. And it's all the tropical plants, all the plants that can't survive outside in the wintertime. And here's an overhead view of the conservatory. It's quite impressive, even from a distance, to see this and say, oh my goodness, that is just something just you wouldn't expect in San Antonio. One of the things that San Antonio's garden does is they partner with their water department to help people figure out what they can grow without using too much water. Because San Antonio has a very limited water supply, and because they don't have any above ground reservoirs, they're dependent on the aquifer. They need to make sure that they use the least amount of water possible when growing plants in their area. So they have a whole series of gardens that show you how you can grow different types of drought-tolerant plants for your landscape. And I saw this in San Antonio first, and then a couple of years later, they started doing this in Dallas as well. And they've got it on 1/3 of an acre, showing people what'll work. Here's images from the Water Saver Garden looking back at the conservatory. Of course, San Antonio has a bit longer growing season, and usually their winters are milder. And so things will grow there longer than they will in Dallas. But they don't get nearly as much water as we do from rainfall. Now they have a Texas Native Trail, which allows you to walk through areas like the Hill Country, the Piney Woods, and South Texas. So they're giving people a chance to travel to other parts of Texas without leaving this garden. Now here's images from the trail. Of course, it's always important when you're going through a garden to make sure that you have adequate seating in case your legs give out after walking a while, and also adequate restrooms and water. Now, they also have some display gardens. Their botanical garden opened in 1980, the oldest part. So actually, it's a fairly recent garden. Here you're looking at the formal and display gardens. Now, San Antonio, there's a lot to see and do there. So you want to allow several hours to walk through those gardens. There is food on site. Now, since it's South Texas, it's going to be a bit warmer than Dallas throughout the year. So if you like to go outside, but you don't want to get too hot, spring and fall are your best times to visit. So now we're leaving San Antonio. We're going to the Texas Discovery Gardens. Now this little gem was originally the Dallas Civic Gardens. The building dates back to the centennial in 1936. It's been transformed, and now it's a very focused, environmentally friendly garden. And they also have a butterfly house. But if you haven't been in a while, it's a very interesting place to visit. Because of COVID, they've reduced their hours to only open Wednesday through Sunday. But if you've got kids or grandkids, it's a great place to go visit. And if you're an adult, it's a great place to visit because you can interact with butterflies. But they're very organically focused, and they're always trying to help people learn. That's another thing. All of these gardens are providing classes of one sort or another to help you take better care of your environment. Now, I put this photo in because my garden club donated an ash tree a number of years ago to the gardens. And they had trouble with the first tree that it didn't get enough water. The second tree got too much water, but the third tree survived. So we were happy the third tree survived. Now this is their Grand Allée. And those are savanna hollies on either side of the garden there. They have a big water feature. A butterfly chair, of course, they're big into butterflies, so they even have a chair that looks like a butterfly. The Blue Star Memorial was put in by the Dallas Council of Garden Clubs. It's part of the National Garden Clubs, and the Blue Star marker is a memorial to service in World War II, and they're scattered all across the country. Started back in the 1940s in New Jersey, and this program has gone across the country now. But this is to honor the service during World War II. And it's located at the Texas Discovery Gardens. Now, butterflies, one of my favorite insects, and anything you can do to help them is important these days because they're having a hard time surviving our environment. They've added a reptile house. So if you've got little boys who love snakes and lizards and things, it's a great place to take them during the summertime. Now this is inside the butterfly house. That's an angel's trumpet. You can actually grow these outside. I know people who've done it, but you have to take extra care because they're tender. They're cold tender, but you'd have to mulch it a lot to make sure that it would survive a Texas winter. But they're beautiful plants. This sculpture in the garden, this was donated by Stanley Marcus. And his family has given a number of things to this garden. There are some gardens named after members of his family. Admission varies by age. There are no food options on site unless you have a special event. And allow at least 90 minutes to tour the gardens and the butterfly house. And again, it's at Fair Park. It's not that far away. And it's a nice place to visit. And they've really done a lot to improve the gardens. Tyler's known for roses. So they established a rose garden in 1952. 14 acres, 38,000 rose bushes. Now, these photos are from some years back, and I understand that they lost a lot of roses during the big freeze in February. But I'm sure they'll be putting them back in. The ones that didn't make it, they'll be replacing them. It's a fun place to visit in spring or fall. In the spring, late March is the Azalea Festival. October is the Rose Festival. And in both those occasions, they're showcasing their gardens at their best. And It's a fun place to visit. I like to go in the spring to see the Azalea Festival because you can't grow azaleas in Dallas unless you want to spend an awful lot of time and effort beyond what most gardeners want to spend. So it's nice to go somewhere else where they just grow naturally and you have to worry about them. And their roses are beautiful. So we've got a few photos from the rose garden. And this is one place I need to go back to because I haven't been in a while and get some new photos. But again, it's only an hour and a half drive to Tyler. Here's a water lily pond. And right next to this rose garden is the Gregg County Master Gardener Garden. And this is, the Master Gardeners take a lot of effort into helping other gardeners learn about taking care of their plants. And now they have to go through a year's course of classes, and then they have to give back to the community in volunteer and service time. And in Tyler, they've created a garden to give you ideas of what you can grow in your garden. Of course, their soil's a bit different, so things that grow in Tyler don't necessarily grow in Dallas. So this was a place to find some new ideas and say, well, maybe I could grow that in my yard. And now we've gone from Tyler to Austin. Now it's about a 3 to 4 hour drive to Austin these days. And the Zilker Botanic Gardens is an interesting little garden on the south side of Austin, just across the Colorado River. It's the first exit off of I-35. And it's between the Mopac and I-35. It's 26 acres. It's called the Jewel in the Heart of Austin. It's got a lot of old trees. It's built on a hill and it sort of slopes down towards the river. They've got a Japanese garden. They've got a prehistoric garden, and they've got a rose garden. It's got lots of unique plants. They've got dinosaur footprints. And these are not footprints from members of the Texas legislature, although sometimes I wonder. But there were dinosaurs at one time in Texas. And they have a lot of interesting water features. And notice they're using a lot of stone because, of course, this is built on a hillside. Now here we've got Angel's Trumpet growing outside. Now remember we had it in the Texas Discovery Garden. They were inside, but these are growing outside. And they do quite well in the southern climate of Austin. Staghorn Fern, this was outside their main entrance building. Waterfalls. Everyone wants a waterfall in their garden, but it's hard to get that kind of a waterfall without a lot of effort if you're doing it in your home garden. Asparagus fern. Now, asparagus fern, you can grow this in North Texas. You can grow it in your garden. It'll die back in the wintertime, but it'll come back every year. It's stubborn. It will not get killed, even by the great freeze of February. Visitor notes. So this is a fairly inexpensive garden. I think we paid like $6 to get inside. The only food options were vending machines. But there's some great great places to eat just outside this garden. Back a little ways towards I-35, there's a whole bunch of great places to eat. You're going to want to wear sensible shoes because this terrain slopes. So you're going to be going up and down hills. Allow 2 hours to visit this garden to fully see everything. And you never know, you just might encounter something you never knew was there before. Now, so that's all our gardens, our top 10 in Texas. Now, if you want information on other public gardens in Texas or anywhere around the globe, you can go to the Rainbow Garden website. Rainbow Garden Texas, Club North Texas has a database of public gardens around the globe. So when you're going to travel next time and you're wanting to do something that doesn't cost a lot of money, gives you a chance to get out in the open air and see something unique and special, check out our website. We have gardens literally from all around the globe. I was looking at our website this morning and we had someone visiting from Kenya, and he was looking for, or he or she was looking for public gardens in Kenya. And luckily we had some gardens listed. So, but I've got gardens from all over Texas. If you're going to Canada, I've got Canadian gardens by province. If you ever get to go to England, I have them listed by county. So, and they're links literally to different gardens everywhere, because public gardens are kind of interesting to see how people do things differently when it comes to plants. So, questions? Let
All
me stop.
right. Well, you got a fantastic presentation statement, and they want to go visit these gardens now. So if anyone else has questions, please put them for Stan in the chat. I have a question as a plant grower. Do any of these places sell plants?
Texas Discovery does in the spring and in the fall. Fort Worth does. They have plant sales. The Arboretum, I've never heard them have a plant sale, but most of these places will have plant sales at some point during the year to raise money. Your best bet is to either contact them or sign up for their email list and find out what events they've got coming up. So, I mean, it's just, but most of them will sell plants at some time because they want to raise a bit of money. And if these plants are doing well, they're going to have a lot of extra plants to share. And that's always a key. When someone says, oh, I've got these plants to share with you, that means they're probably an aggressive, invasive kind of plant that loves to thrive wherever you put them. So, but yes, they do have plant sales.
That's how I wound up with a backyard full of Datura. Is someone said, "Oh, I have this great plant."
Yes.
I put it in a pot.
Yeah, the Texas Discovery Gardens, they're great for Texas natives and plants that love butterflies.
Perfect.
So they're the place to go. And you can call them to find out when the next plant sale is. If you're a member, you get a discount. If you're not a member, it'll cost you a little more, but it's still worth it to support them.
All right.
Okay.
And got a couple more thank yous in the chat. I know oh, someone's very excited to take their grandsons to Discovery Garden in Fair Park. Do you have any idea about the best day or time when it won't be packed? What's the best time to in your experience?
Right now, none of the gardens seem to be that busy. So, I mean, any time to go would go at this point. Because with COVID, people aren't going out as much. Although public gardens are probably the best place to go because you got all that fresh air. But I haven't seen them that crowded. So, and of course, with all the rain, it's going to be a little bit less crowded as well. So, and it's going to get kind of warm pretty soon. So as soon as it stops raining, it's going to be summer. So you want to think of maybe going early in the morning or late in the afternoon when it's cooled off a bit. But early mornings are best. And some, like the Dallas Arboretum does an early hours for members. So you might check with them as well. But it's always best to check ahead because the rules will keep changing. But that's the thing to look for, is contact their website to start with. And if you're not sure, call them. They'll be glad to answer your questions. And they'll be glad to see you come and visit them.
That's perfect. I'm sure that, yes, I'm sure people are, all these places are very excited to get people back visiting all their plants.
Yeah. One other thing, if you become a member of like the Texas Discovery Gardens or the Dallas Arboretum or the Fort Worth Botanic Garden, they have what they call a reciprocal membership. And you can, some of these gardens will let you in for free because you're a member at one of the local gardens here in this area. And let's see what else. That's an important thing I want to remember. Oh, also, I'm a member of the Dallas Council of Garden Clubs. If you are even more interested and you want to know more about gardening, they're a great place to meet fellow gardeners. And there's Dallas Council Garden Clubs all across Dallas County. So, And let's see, I saw something about Tyler and the roadside. Yes. There are several nurseries on the road on the way out of Tyler back to Interstate 20. And we always stop there on that visit. We always stop by and get some plants before we come back to Dallas, because they always have some interesting plants to see.
Yeah, I remember those roadside rose stands. It's kind of the honor system where they have the bouquets of roses. And I think that's just whenever roses are in bloom that they have those available. It's usually not in the heat of the summer, but in the spring or the fall, they usually have roses on the side of the road.
Right, but I mean, they're actually nurseries. There's several
Oh,
nurseries on the
okay.
road coming out of Tyler, heading back to 20. So we always stop at those nurseries and pick up some plants.
Nice. Very cool. And Grace, no, Grace, you're never too old to take a trip to Galveston.
Right.
Yes, definitely take a trip down there. I know it changed a lot. I went back a few years ago after having not been there since I was a kid. It had changed a lot since I was a kid. All right. Did anybody else have any questions for Stan? Oh gosh, is asked, is Tyler still considered the rose capital of the world? I think they still say they are. I don't know.
Well, actually, if you want to be honest, most roses that are sold in the United States today come from Colombia. If you're buying roses in Europe, most of those come from Ethiopia. But they do grow roses still around Tyler, but just not as many as they used to. And they can call themselves anything they want to. But yeah, most of your roses that you get in a store these days will be coming from Colombia, because they have a year-round climate for growing roses.
That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's good to know. All right. Any last call for questions here? I think that may be it. Be sure to join us next Monday. We're gonna have a houseplant expert talk about houseplants. So it's a good thing in the summer when you may not be wanting to go out into your garden, you can at least grow some stuff indoors. Plus, there's tons of benefits of growing houseplants like oxygen, and they just make you happy. And also, there will be a children's program this Thursday at 2, which will actually be a tour of my garden, and we're going to talk a little bit about how plants grow with. But that's for kids. So if you have any kids or grandkids, be sure to pass that along. All right. And oh, someone asked me directly if we could get a copy of your PowerPoint.
Well, it's kind of big.
Okay. All right.
The last time because I had to send it, I think, with Google this time, because it's just too large. And the thing is, this program changes over time. So what you see today is not what you're going to see the next time I present it.
All right.
But just think of those 10 as a starter of places to see. There's other places. I went to one. I was at a new garden that I had not seen before in Athens on Sunday, and that's the East Texas Arboretum. So, I mean, there's other places to go around here. So I sort of want to keep that program because I'm changing it as we go. So,
Right.
and it's too big. It's about 136 megabytes.
Oh, yeah, all those beautiful pictures you have.
Yeah, so it's sort of, it's bigger than most people's email can handle.
Yes, but I'll be sure to in the follow-up email for this program share links to all the gardens that Stan shared, so you can go ahead and a lot of their websites have beautiful pictures too. So
Okay. Anyway, hopefully this will inspire you to get out of the house now that you're vaccinated and go see the natural world. And these gardens should be in pretty good shape with all the rain we've had.
all right.
Okay. So
Well,
that's
thank
it.
you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. I hope everyone hopefully it will dry out not too much. We don't Texas is always extremes, right? We go from too much rain to not enough rain. So
Right. And if you'd like, I could come back in the fall and talk about bulbs that you can
ooh,
plant.
yes, I'll be in contact with you about that, Stan.
Yeah. bulbs that you can plant in the fall that will bloom in the spring.
Definitely. Yeah. I know that's something people love to grow because it is beautiful spring blossom. All right.
Okay.
Well, all right. Thank
Thanks
y'all
so
so
much,
much.
Stan.
Thank you. I will leave y'all and see you soon.
All right.
Good.
Thank you.